And hi, welcome to Project 180. I'm Kevin McGowan. Today I'm speaking with an old friend of mine, Jonathan Eagan. Hey, John.
Hey, Kevin.
Thanks for joining in today. I know I obviously I've known you a long time, but I've known you personally. We've been at rock shows like we did a few weeks ago, which is a lot of fun. But you're also in a similar workspace to me. And when we were out there a few weeks ago, we talked a lot of shop, and I was like, oh, okay, we should do this. But you've been a project manager, people manager for a lot of different companies and a lot of different projects over the years. But maybe you could just introduce yourself and a bit of your background.
Sure. Actually, it's I've been more in the product management space. So I've worked with a lot of project managers, but yeah, for my particular expertise, been more in the product space. So having said that, I've worked in the tech sector for probably the last 20 years of my career. Started off as a business analyst, working on various projects. Gathering requirements, doing solution analysis, that sort of thing. Probably about 8 years ago, when the organization I was working with at the time started shifting to more agile delivery, I switched over to product management, and so I kind of fell in love with that space and that. That expertise, I guess. And I've been doing that as well as the organization I'm working for now, we actually call it program management. It's a little different, but a lot of similarities there. And so, yeah, back in the beginning of my career, I really started in the finance and insurance, worked for a startup. And the last few years, I've actually moved more into the public sector. And currently I'm working for a nonprofit. So it's been quite a breadth of products that I've worked on. And yeah, it's been a really fun and interesting journey.
I'll bet it's not often hear people say they kind of fell in love with like a role. I like how you described that. Like, what was it about product management that, again, that level higher, I guess, than project management, but that what was it about that kind of got you going, that got you excited?
Yeah, I find I get very excited about what should we build? And I've always relied heavily on the amazing project managers that I've had the benefit of working with, to really help on the delivery side of that. So I tend to thrive very much on oh, should we build this thing or should we build that thing? What new features should we be working on? What are our customers saying about us? How are we positioned in the market? And those are the things I think that really energize me. And I know I'm probably not as good when it comes to okay, well, let's plan this, let's plan how this delivery is going to work, and that sort of thing. And like I said,
You're comfortable in the macro, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's cool. I know one of the things we were chatting about when we were out there a few weeks ago was priority. Right?
Right.
So that's going to be kind of a theme of what we're talking about today. But in a lot of organizations, my experience, and I think yours too, it's hard to know what to prioritize, especially something there's always shared resources of one way or another in an organization. And when you're on that product level, you've got all these projects maybe falling in underneath.
Yeah.
How do you approach prioritizing that? All these different expectations and all these maybe different shareholders or stakeholders.
Yeah, and to add another dimension to that, some organizations I've been at where I'm kind of competing against my other product managers, where they're fighting for resources and time. So yeah, it's an interesting problem. I wouldn't say there's a silver bullet when it comes to that, but just as far as some of the challenges I've seen in different organizations I've worked for, you have a lot of ideas, you have a lot of opinions, but obviously limited resources and time to really be able to execute on all the projects that you want to. And I think also I'd say even earlier in my career as a business analyst, having, all these different project managers kind of coming to me and wanting, some of my time and attention, how do I as a worker prioritize, like, which one, when I got like so many demands coming at me for my time. And so if you think of like, software developers, QA folks, other administrative people, and even like, business folks that are going to talk to stakeholders, they tend to get a lot of, different projects coming and asking for their expertise and that sort of thing. So, it's difficult because you really, like, as an organization, you can try to do everything at once, but typically that doesn't work very well. There's too many, your focus, people like the organization or people's focus is really, too spread out.
Right.
And, I think some of the other things I've seen from a prioritization challenge, so that would be like an organization that really didn't put a lot of time or effort into prioritizing. But I've also seen where sometimes you get like, maybe the executive or the loudest voice in the room, is what I call like the squeaky wheel effect, right? They get the oil because that's the I think people sometimes mistake passion for importance, right? So sometimes that's where things get allocated because they think, decision makers might think, well, Jonathan's really, passionate about this thing, so it must be important. Either that or they just want to shut me up. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've certainly seen a lot of examples like that, and it's interesting because like the textbooks, right, and how to do a project, whatever, like it always says, you go back to the corporate mission, the vision, and everything should kind of feed into that. But it's not always that simple because they all might feed into it. But how do you go through that process of saying, okay, I'm like, I'm a product manager, I'm a project manager, I'm a software developer, or I'm just, a director, whatever my role is. I'm getting all these requests. Like in your view, like how do I pick? Like where do I use, or what do I use as a baseline to help make those decisions?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of different methodologies or frameworks out there that people can use. I do agree with the idea that, the prioritization needs to align to like the organization's strategic goals. But I think you're right when you say like, how do you like trace that, that alignment? And I think
it's
that
hard
can
to measure.
become,
Like, is this 70% important, or is this
yeah,
40%? Like, it's really hard to rate, one versus another.
yeah, totally. And I know like having, been in a situation where I'm trying to get my projects done, I'm going to make the best argument I can that, my project has the strongest relationship to the corporate goals, right? And so, does that mean that objectively my projects are, or does it mean I'm just better at making arguments than my than my peers? So I think over the last few years, I discovered this. I've tried a bunch of different frameworks because I tend to pay a lot of attention to this priority and conversation, and I've stumbled across one called the Rice scoring method for prioritization. It was actually introduced by a company called Intercom, and it gives me like a nice framework that it's certainly, going back to your comment about being able to measure that corporate alignment, like I think those are really subjective values. It does provide like a measurement structure, but for me, the more important thing is that it provides a good framework for the conversation that goes around prioritization, right? So often, you might have people arguing, well, project A is more important than project B because of, it's going to hit, more people or whatever, right? Like, I think having that ability so that the projects aren't being compared like apples to oranges against each other. I think that's really the key for me. So I can maybe describe the methodology a bit.
Yeah, please. That'd be great.
So it's one of those acronyms that spells something, right? So you have, RICE. The R stands for reach. So when it's important, and you can set up a spreadsheet to kind of list out your projects, and there's a formula at the end to kind of come up with the score. But the reach is really, it could be the number of people. I mean, it's going to depend on your organization, but it could be the number of people that your project is gonna reach. It could be the number of transactions. So really, you need to find like something that's common amongst all the different types of projects that you're prioritizing, that you can provide. This is the criteria for reach, right? So typically on the types of projects I've worked on in the past, I typically use the number of users that I'm going to reach, and it's within a specified time frame, right? So like, let's say a quarter or a year. So it kind of, that'd be like a strict number. So let's say I'm going to reach, 3,000 customers or something. The I is going to stand for impact. So this is where the conversation really comes down to, what's that alignment for your corporate goals, right? Are you looking to increase adoption? Are you, convert your sales pipeline, get more signups, affect your users in some kind of way? So that's kind of the conversation around like, what's that impact measurement? And as you're doing that, that's really like a multiple choice, right? So you don't have to get too fancy. You either have a massive impact, high, medium, low, or minimal, and you're assigning a number of points, right? So 3 points for massive, 2 for high, 1 for medium. Low would be half a point, minimal a quarter point. And so the next metric is confidence, right? So I think you have to really do your best to be able to back up your estimates or your arguments, right? So
right.
John, you say you're going to reach 3,000 customers. Like, why do you think that's the case? Oh, okay. Well, I know that 3% or 20% of my user base uses this feature, and this is the number one feature that's being requested through our customer portal. I might want to rate that as a higher confidence, whereas oh, well, I think this sounds like a really cool idea. I think that this is the next, big Facebook killer or something, So I might say that's a low confidence, right? So again, like this would be like a multiple choice, high, medium, or low confidence. For high, you're going to assign 100%, medium 80%, and low 50%. And then it comes down to the estimate. So you don't want to do like you don't want to do like an extensive estimation work, but you want to ballpark it into like, say, person months. And again, this needs to be consistent. You don't want to get down to like, oh, this one's 4 hours, this one's 8 hours, this one's however many. And you really don't want to go into the weeds, but also that's going to play into your confidence as well, as say like, what, why do you think this is 4 person months? Did you have a conversation with engineering, or are you kind of picking that number out of your hat?
Right. Well, it's like an opportunity to go back to, like, you present maybe your thoughts on it, but having a discussion about it is an opportunity for anybody at that level, maybe in the organization, to say, have you checked those numbers? Is that real? Like, it gives you that chance to really have that feedback and repurpose or recycle the data a bit.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you're going to take the reach, multiply it by the impact and confidence, and divide it by the effort, and that'll give you a score for each for each project that you're trying to prioritize. Often what happens is I find the projects that come out on top are not the ones that I always expected would be. But I think that becomes the placeholder then for the conversation. Like you said, like, you go back to some of the stakeholders and say, you said the impact was, going to be like medium or high. Why do you think that was? Is there, like, should your confidence be lower because you pulled that number out of your hat? And those become some of the discussions. And I think instinctively as well, you're going to look at project A and project B and compare them and go, why is project B higher than project A? Is it because the effort is so much smaller? I mean, it's possible, or is it, is something out of whack, right? And that becomes like conversation with you that you can have with stakeholders. Say, intuitively this doesn't look right, but let's go back and frame the conversation about why we think this project is more important based on those 4 criteria.
Okay, no, I like that model, and my project manager brain is percolating because I haven't thought of this really much before myself. But when you're faced with the new project, right? Somebody's got, and you have to do, and following all the, again, the standard textbook rules, you kind of go through a project charter where you scope out high level what you think it's going to be. That's really the opportunity to do that price, I guess, analysis, and to be able to deliver that up maybe to senior management, whoever the decision makers are, and give them that data about, because you're being tasked with kind of compose what this can be, should be, how it should work at a high level, but having that data mixed into it makes it maybe an easier decision in terms of going forward.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity to rethink some of the scope of your projects as well, right? Like if you have projects coming out with really high effort, is there, like, the question I always ask myself is there an opportunity to split this out, and maybe there's a smaller functionality set that we can boil into a smaller initiative that's going to give us, like, a little more reach and impact with a little less effort. So I think that can be some of those conversations as well, to say, you know what, we think this one is really important, but the effort on it is massive. What aspects of this project could we split out and still deliver like a lot of the value at a smaller cost or a shorter time frame?
I can ask you one more question. In an environment where there's a lot of shifting, right? Maybe they're not doing this RICE work to kind of figure things out before they're making decisions, but there's a lot of shifting. Maybe it's a small startup. I think we both worked in places like that. Oh, okay, this client wants X, so we really gotta, boom, go do that. But then another client shows up, and you're kind of chasing the shiny object all the time. How do you manage to have that discussion in the organization, like in terms of focusing and really getting to that ability to have this conversation, because the whole place just kind of keeps going almost random? How would you approach something like that? Or what would you advise somebody in that situation?
Yeah, so I actually did it. In my situation, I had a lot of competing priorities just for my own product. And what I did is I kind of laid out the few initiatives, and I'm getting stuff from leadership, I'm hearing stuff from users, and I'm, just even in my own brain trying to figure out like what's the most important thing, right? So I kind of needed to have that internal conversation to figure out priority.
Smart.
So I did it with my own projects first, and I just put it in a spreadsheet, and then having conversation with my leadership, having conversation with my stakeholders, I was transparent about that. I said, look, here's what, right? So I basically laid out my thought process on why I thought project A was more important than project B, and laid this, so, taught them about the RICE scoring method, showed them, here's how I scored it. If they disagreed with it, we could have that conversation about why is it you disagree with how I rated the impact or the reach or my confidence level. And once I started doing that, it went a little bit viral. So other product managers started doing it. It started to become part of the questions that the leadership would ask around,
That's
what's the impact for this proposal that you're coming to me with, right? And so if you have like influence in your organization to start from a corporate governance process to bring something like this in, I mean, that's fantastic. But if you're in an organization already where priorities are shifting a lot, that might not be like the place to start. I kind of like the grassroots or the bottom up approach on things like that. So that's what I would recommend.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I mean, nobody's going to say no to data, right? You can have opinions, you can have feelings about it, and that's great. You might have a gut reaction, think, yeah, we got to go do this. But if it's backed up with numbers, you can say, well, look, here's the impact we're going to have.
Yeah.
Here's the depth that we're going to have, and here's how many people are going to affect, etc. That's a case it's hard to argue with. Now, it might not be right, but you can have that conversation. It inspires more conversation, which is really what you want anyway. Because I think what happens in that scenario, you're following the shiny object. They're not having those conversations. So this is a nice framework to make sure that happens.
Yeah, and like at the end of the day, you still might not be automatically doing whatever comes up at the top of your list, because there's other factors. Maybe you don't have the right resources for that type of project, or there's some other regulatory project that you really need to get in, that might not score as high, but it at least there's that framework for the conversation, and you kind of get rid of that the loudest or the squeakiest wheel in the room.
It's a great place to finish it off. Jonathan Eagan, thanks so much for taking the time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. Thanks, Kevin.